Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. It's great to see this showing on a Thursday night here. I'd like to start off by introducing myself, and I think we'll have everyone else introduce them. My name is Jay Smalley, and I'm the president of Turning Point USA here on campus. We started out last September with 3 members, and now we're over 75 strong on campus, so it's great. And with that, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Amelie, and I'm in Turning Point. I was one of those 3 members helping start out last year, so it's very great to see everybody here. I'm also part of Young Women for America, so I'm here kind of representing both, but yeah.
Hello, everyone. Again, just want to echo Jace and just say thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name's Anthony, and I am a leader of a group called Gamechangers here in Omaha, Nebraska. We're part of a church, Lord of Hosts Church here in Omaha, and our purpose really is to help the next generation, which is you guys, walk into the true identity that you are and what you're called to do and be outside of any of the, I would say, the indoctrinational messages that are out there right now. And we decided to partner with Jace and Turning Point USA because we believe in what he's doing, as well as Amelie, and we just want to help.
My name is Matthew Kuhneman, and I'm co-founder with him with the Gamechangers group and brand that we started through Lord of Hosts Church in Omaha, Nebraska. And really, God has helped us in taking that across the world with, our podcast and with different things that we do with other organizations and ministries and things like that. And so it's really an honor tonight to be here with Jace and Amelie, here with Turning Point USA Omaha, and getting behind this. And thank you guys for coming out here. It's really just honestly amazing to see people that are passionate about the turning point in this nation, the turning point across the globe, and saying, you know what, it's time that I do something different in this season, in this time right now, and using our voice to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna bring a change to what the narrative has been for so long. So thank you guys.
So this is gonna be a debate style event. So we're gonna encourage anyone who wants to talk about literally anything that's happened in the world in the last month to come to this microphone up front and talk to us about it. We'd love to talk about it with you.
Hi, I've just joined Turning Point USA here. I just want more clarification on what you guys think a conservative healthcare system looks like and how that prospers in America versus a more socialized or European style system of healthcare. What are the pros and cons, I guess?
Stay down here.
Yes, sir.
What are you looking for in healthcare? Do you like the current system that America has, or would you like something closer to a European model?
I'm pretty moderate when it comes to healthcare. I think that the government has more than enough money to cover, you're not having the choice to go to the hospital, something that happens to you, whether that's a chronic disease or an accident. But going to the hospital for things that you might choose to go to the hospital for, I think should be totally private. But I think the government does not do its fair share in keeping this country healthy. With food, with what we put into our body, but also with medicine. I think that the capitalistic style of medicine that we practice here, it drives innovation, right? America's the #1 innovator for medicine, but I think that the government should still help out with hospital bills. I've had family members who are deeply in medical debt, And I know the government's sitting on just stacks of money that we waste a lot. That's why I'm a big supporter of Doge. But I think that the government needs to help a little bit more. So how would you go about that, do you think?
I think that medical bills have gone up so much because of the unhealthy living styles that Americans have had for the last 40 years. A huge part of that is what we eat. It's all highly processed. It's not good for you. We have to start with that stuff. We have to make Americans healthy so that healthcare is affordable again. We need to learn how these other countries, while they have these uniform healthcare systems, they're not near as sick as we are. And we can look at, they don't eat the same food we do. They eat natural food. They don't eat these artificial preservatives. They don't have all these food colorings. I think another huge thing is vaccines. I think that other countries who vaccinate their children less, they have less chronic health issues. And while that's up for debate still, I think it's something worth looking at. I think we have to become a healthier nation first before we start piling more money onto our debt, paying for people's health care.
Yeah, good answer. I guess I would like to get more clarification on how do you think we best go about solving that issue?
I think that RFK Jr. is doing a really good job bringing light to the poison that we're ingesting and the poison that we're injecting into our citizens. I think that once we fix that problem, healthcare will be much more, it won't be as big of an issue for everyone. We'll have less people chronically ill, and so healthcare will become more affordable in turn.
I'd like to answer to that too, if that's what anyone has. I think one of the ways that we can look at streamlining the system and making it more efficient for everyone, to Jace's point, we've got to look at lifestyles, and really that's not a governmental issue. That's down to the individual and household, and I think we can all agree to that. But I also think we need to look at the way that we are incentivizing and subsidizing hospitals. Because right now you've got this weird agreement with the subsidies and in conjunction with the types of medicines that are being released, and the hospitals and big pharma are profiting off of. And so what I think that does is that actually compromises the manner in which our doctors and hospitals choose to treat patients. So rather than treat the cause, they would actually just treat the symptom and garner a lifetime patient. And as to your point, now you're looking at millions and millions of dollars being racked up. Well, we're in the billions now. But if you look at that per household, that's continued to go up. You have to ask yourself, why in the last 20 and 30 years have we seen an increase in cancer? Why have we seen an increase in autism? Why have we seen an increase in diabetes and all these things? Well, and if you look, if you just go out there and you just binge watch on Netflix or whatever, or Hulu for a bit, what's most of your commercials? Pharmaceutical commercials. And they're all about treating the symptom, but we need to get back to actually addressing the cause. So I think first and foremost, we have to look at and honestly address the way that we are incentivizing our healthcare industry to profit. Right now, they are not incentivized to profit to make people healthy. Yep. They're actually profiting off of sick care.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, remind me your name one more time.
Cooper.
Cooper, I appreciate your question, man. Thank you for being here tonight. So, I would just want to say, in my personal opinion, I think we need to also prioritize in America where we're sending our money to. We could, like you said with the hospitals, we could get behind this a lot better if we weren't sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Let's just put it, and cut to the chase, put it into perspective. On top of that, Jace was just talking about processed food. And I mean, you look at a box of Easy Mac, cup of noodles, whatever it is, and kids are putting this stuff into their bodies each and every day, and you can't even pronounce half the things that is on that label on the back of that box. Why are we putting this in our bodies is the big question. Another thing too is I believe there are cures in this world that they are not telling us to certain things like diabetes, cancer, etc., that they are hiding from the consumer, hiding from people. I believe that those things are out there, and that sometimes our government has not had our best interest, and that is why they fight like crazy to go against President Trump, because Trump is for America, Trump is for the people. And so when you have a president that is going against the grain, the deep state, the people that have not had our best interest, that's going to cause a ruckus, because he's somebody that's going to keep it real. He's going to cut to the chase. He's going to put us and you, Cooper, first. And so I think personally, for the people that are out there that are suffering, et cetera, they, see, the government for a long time, they dressed it up like they cared about us. Oh, Obamacare and this and the other. No, honestly, we're paying then our tax dollars for something that is ruining this nation and ruining this country. And we've got to do a complete turnaround on what we're doing now and where we're putting our money. First, it starts with the government. Then you mentioned just the normal person, us as people, living a healthy life. And I think that's important, what we're putting in our bodies. What's our outlook on life? I looked back I saw some video that had like a side-by-side shot of 2025 and then like 1950. And you looked at the difference in people in those decades and those cultures. Like, people were more modest back then. People were healthier. There was a smile on their face. They showed, I don't remember what city or street it was that they showed, but it was like literally a comparison of this exact same block. And people were walking with a smile on their face. They were friendlier, happier, healthier. Obesity and things like that have become a much higher thing in America. People are more sick. Hospitals are filling up, And you look at back in those days, people were nicer, they were kinder, they shook hands with somebody that walked across the street, with them. People were more working, harder and not just being at home doing nothing. And then here in America, our tax dollars, they pay for those people now, unfortunately. So I think it does first and foremost start with us, the person, which is why you all are here tonight, because there's something you want to see changed. And I think that would be the biggest message to people is, okay, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want to see something change in your personal life? And then saying, you know what, I got to use my voice to get behind this, because at the realization at the end of the day, the government has not had our best interests. And that's why I'm so thankful for President Trump being in office right now.
That's all I've got, I think. So thanks, guys.
I think America should take a more isolationist approach in every aspect, not just how we do things overseas, but how we do things here as well. I think the United States gets tangled up in unnecessary wars right now. The Middle East hates us because of how we've been mapping it out and changing their borders. And I think the military-industrial complex is kind of running rampant right now and pulling us into unnecessary problems. And I don't think it's putting America or Christ first.
Are you referencing Israel then? That war?
I could be.
Okay. I think that having a safe world should not be America's first priority. They're fighting their wars, they're picking their battles. Well, I think that we should promote freedom globally. I think that we have much bigger issues here that we have to fix first. We need to put America first, and we need to save our money from these countries overseas that, frankly, we don't know what they're doing with it.
So me and you agree then?
I think so.
All right.
I don't know if anyone else on this panel has a different outlook.
So you said something, you mentioned it's not very Christ-like, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't think it's Christ-like to send bombs or missiles overseas one bit.
That's fair. But let me ask you just on the isolationist approach. You believe in Jesus?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's a big shout out. If Jesus decided that he only wanted to come to save the Jews and took an isolationist approach there, how would that do for us?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
What I'm saying is this nation is founded on Christ-like principles. And while I do agree with you that the military complex and some of the things that we've done, which are documented, to go in and cause an uprising, to install someone else so that we can just, kind of pillage or pilfer the resources in that area, which I'm sure everyone's aware of. That's not good. That's not Christ-like. But I do believe in the second commandment that Jesus had told one of the Pharisees, which was to love your neighbor as you would love yourself. And I believe that having Christian principles, we have a special light in us to not only bear truth, but also to infiltrate this world with love. And so my question to you would be, if we were to take an isolationist approach and were to cease doing all the things that we're doing, including the fact that America is the #1 missions nation to send Bibles, food care, and also missionaries to other regions and nations, what would the world look like?
I don't think Bibles and missionaries is really what I'm referring to here. It's more of military aid, missiles, things like that. I think, the Bible calls on us to be compassionate and generous, but I don't think generosity really includes arming your neighbor with weapons so he can strike his neighbor down.
Fair question. That's a fair point. My thought is this on this, because I do agree that the arms dealing it definitely needs to be tampered down. This profit for war thing has been going on way too long. But generally speaking, if you'd had a neighbor that couldn't properly defend themselves from an imminent invasion, would it be so wrong to make sure that they were armed and could defend themselves altogether?
Not really, but at some point people need to fend for themselves. And I think, so there was actually word within the United States Special Forces, one of the Green Berets was in Gaza with the UN distributing supplies. This is a United States member of the military, by the way, like this is somebody credible. He was talking about how the IDF was shooting children in the back of the head with sniper rifles. So I don't believe that's really arming your neighbor to defend themselves. I think there's legitimate concern that there is harm being done over there.
So my question to you is, who makes that determination on what is right and what is wrong? Where does the line begin and end? Because if you look at our own nation's history, we were friends and family were arming one another to fight against each other in the Civil War. And that was within our own borders. Even now, we've got the issue of migrants coming across the border illegally. Some of them are criminals. And we're sending ICE agents and Border Patrol out to protect our cities, and people are saying that's wrong. And that's within our own borders. We haven't even gotten to the part of isolationist. So my question is, at what point, who makes that determination of what is right to do, what is wrong to do in terms of who we should send arms to, who we shouldn't to, how much we should, how much we shouldn't? And if we were to stop altogether, what would the world look like?
Well, I think that the immigrants coming here are not respecting the law of the land. They're coming over here illegally, they're criminals, and the difference between us and what Middle Easterners do is that we are protecting our own borders and acting in coordinates within our own laws. And they are, they're not really acting biblically by coming here and disrespecting the laws of our land. So I think the line that we draw is what does God say and what does the Constitution say? What does international law say? What does fairness say?
And to me, I agree with you, but that's been my question, right? Between the various organizations like the UN and all of these other world organizations that are determining what international law is, how do we determine what is the right thing to do or not do? Because there are some countries that are saying that the way that America operates within its own borders is wrong or unlawful. So again, I'm just wondering, where does this begin and end with this dilemma?
Well, ideally, it operates on a biblical framework, I think. I think ICE is justified in what they're doing. The same manner that Jesus flipped tables, the way that those people weren't respecting God's law, there's people here not respecting America's law. So we're flipping their tables and sending them back.
So my question to you is, okay, if we're talking about providing arms for other people that maybe they can't quite defend themselves, right? You know, okay, let's just break this down in an easier perspective maybe. Do you have a brother or sister at all?
I do. I have 2 brothers.
Okay, 2 brothers. Are you the oldest?
No.
You're the youngest?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just say you get married, have a son one day, and he gets bullied in school or something like that. Are you going to teach him how to defend himself, or are you going to let him get picked on? Or are you going to sit him down and say, hey, I want you to defend yourself?
I'll teach him to defend himself, but I'm not arming him with an AR-15.
Okay. So, but let's say he goes and he defends himself, but he has anger issues or something, and it builds from that. Is that your fault, or is that just his choice as a person and human being?
That's not within my control.
Okay, so some things overseas and what we provide and support in the initial support process, the end result is not always going to be the fault of the United States. Because let's be real here. So should we have not gotten involved when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor? Should we have not gone there and tried to end that war when the Holocaust was going on with Nazi Germany? Should we have just not gone overseas there and got involved? Because here's the thing, at what level does that stop? Because at the end of the day, you allow one little sliver in, how much does that grow? You know, and that's a fair question. I get your point though about, yeah, you don't want innocent people dying, you know, but at the end of the day, Jesus said 2 things in the Bible. He talked once in the Garden of Gethsemane when he got arrested about, put your sword down, those that live by the sword die by the sword. The other thing that he said before he got arrested was, sell your cloak and buy a sword. Now, those are 2 what most people would think contradicting things, but what he's talking about is, if you live to fight, live in anger, etc., then you're going to reap that. But sell your cloak and buy a sword, he was talking about cultural issues, things in the spirit that were going to come in that world and cause a ruckus that, hey, you've got to protect yourself. There comes a time in defending yourself, and there comes a time in when you're just seeking anger, vengeance, rioting. That's why he was against the Zealots. He didn't like what Judas was doing, you know? And so there's a big cultural, I want you to understand, there's a big fine line and difference between the 2 of those, if that makes sense.
Sure. At the same time, though, I think we also need to choose who we support better. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Lavon affair or the USS Liberty incident in the 70s. You can go into detail. So during the 7-Day War, Israel saw one of our intelligence ships, I think it was the Suez Canal, and we were doing God knows what over there. You know, it was the CIA, but yeah, that's fair. I agree with. But you know, what we were doing over there, we're not exactly sure. But what ended up happening was there were some unmarked jets that flew over. The flag on our ship was visible, and these jets, you know, they bombed the ship and they killed about 140 people, 140 Americans, by the way. They tried to cover it up, and it turned out it was Israel that bombed our ship. They never admitted that it was intentional. And then the other incident was the Lavon affair, which is when they attempted to start a false flag operation in Egypt and try to pin it on Egyptian nationals. And both these incidents were targeted at United States citizens, and they were trying to pull us into wars in the Middle East by framing Middle Eastern countries for doing it. So I think the analogy of arming my son to fight a bully doesn't really compare, because what if my son betrayed his family? What if my son struck his brother with a knife, stabbed him in the back? Why should I arm my son to fight somebody else?
So the process is the initial part before that even happens. I'm talking like you've noticed this, you don't know that, because let's agree on this. Would you say there's corruption in everything we look at, right? Anywhere you go, any business, country, whatever, organization, there is some sort of corruption or somebody that has the wrong agenda anywhere you go.
That's correct.
100%. So there's always going to be a bad apple in every room you walk into, every place you go. There's always going to be a bad apple somewhere. Unfortunately, we can't control all of that. What we can control is what we impart into other people, how we build up or tear down other people. And unfortunately, there are things in this world where there are really evil people that want to frame other people in a negative way, a negative light. And unfortunately, we've seen that with our very own president, okay? All the 42 indictments is a perfect example. So when we're over talking about, this issue, I think personally, it's really out of our control what others do with the things that we try to support them in. Like if you're trying to support your son by defending himself, but then he takes that and grows up and stabs someone with a knife, it's like, yeah, you might live with feeling guilty, but that's not that blood is not on your hands. You simply were being a father from a very young age. You know what I mean?
Sure. Do you think prayer is not sufficient enough to support Israel? Is prayer not sufficient enough to support
I think prayer is the number
Ukraine?
one thing we should do, but faith without works is dead. So you also have to have prayer and supplication. You have to have works with faith. It's not where, we can just believe for something and then sit on our hands and do nothing, twiddle our thumbs, do nothing. There has to be faith with works. I can't just sit around and say, God, I'm praying for my bills to be paid, but then refuse to work. I'm praying God for me to live a healthier life, but I'm eating all that processed food and not working out, and I'm going to bed, at 3 a.m. and getting up at 6 and living off 3 hours sleep. I'm not putting the works behind the faith. But then there's some people that they do all the works, they do all the necessary things, but they talk terribly. They let the worst things out of their mouth. They're terrible to their neighbor. They don't love like Christ did. So they may do all these personal things in their life, like work really hard, etc., but then they don't believe it. They don't believe it's going to come to pass. So I think you have to have faith with the works.
That is a fair point, and I was thinking about that before walking into this argument. But as far as I think we should walk away from the Israel or Ukraine argument, because like I said, America first. So why are we extending ourselves so much to foreign countries and migrants when we really should be focusing on things here?
That I 100% agree with.
If we just, funded schools, funded roads, got everybody going to church, I think things would be a lot better in America. But we're too busy extending ourselves to all of these other people.
Well, you look at a lot of videos from other countries, like the education system in China and what they're teaching kids in China, like how to build tables and chairs. I'm like, where is that in America? So that I 100% agree. The education system, what we're teaching people in our own country, that's got to change. We need to talk about motherhood and fatherhood in our schools instead of bringing drag queens in and teaching people to be a tree or be something that they're not. You know what I mean?
I want to add to what you said, because so now that you're asking that question, I think it's interesting that you brought that up, because I think we have to look at, maybe it's not necessarily the foreign aid that we're sending that's inherently bad, but it's how it's being distributed and how it's being used. So I'm bringing back the Ukraine argument because there's a lot of questions why billions of dollars of taxpayer money got sent over there, but yet that country seems to be continuously ravaged. They can't seem to find an end to the fight. I'm sure that's a long rabbit trail. But at the end of the day, if we are one of the most powerful and influential nations, how come billions of dollars hasn't made a dent? Or if you're looking at these other countries where foreign aid has been sent, why hasn't that? And so I think what you're maybe getting at is we have to start taking a look at the people that we're electing, the people that are making these decisions on our behalf, and how they're using our money. Going back to your original question, yeah, I think that we can all agree that the way that the military complex has been used and leveraged over the past several decades, ethically, not great. Track record with the CIA, also not great. But to stop it altogether to Matthew's point, I would start to wonder, would that do irreparable damage? Because now, instead of actually having at least a presence where we're doing somewhat of a job of policing and helping to enforce not just international law, but perhaps biblical principles, and I know it's not necessarily cut and dry because, like you said, sending a missile over there, okay. But to not have any presence at all, to just completely vacate that place, you would have to ask yourself, is that worse damage than actually being there?
I believe it is worse damage. I think the moment that our country screwed itself was just by going anywhere. Why was America so prosperous in like the 1800s up until the point of like, you know, the 1920s, say, or pre-World War I? America was the most prosperous it has ever been.
So I was going to just touch note on saying that I agree. Like, I think that we should support our neighbors, and I think that includes, like, as a country, we should support other countries. But I'm just saying, like, looking at today, we officially had a ceasefire talked about and agreed upon in like the Gaza Strip, and I think that that was entirely because of America's intervention. We look at both leaders from Hamas and in Israel. Neither of them initially wanted to sign a ceasefire. If we had not supplied all of the military support that we had to Israel, and they were doing it on their own, then we wouldn't have the leverage to then tell them that they need to accept that ceasefire. If you're looking at that whole argument today that they were talking about, Donald Trump had told Israel multiple times that they were signing the ceasefire, that it wasn't an option, and that because we had sent so much money into them, so much army and military, then they had to, because it's like otherwise we would pull their funding. So I think that it is good for us to support our neighbors, to be in other places and in other countries, because it also provides us, from a political stance, more leverage. And now we have a ceasefire signed, and I think that's better to have peace in our world, and that is because of our nation being involved. So.
I don't have a rebuttal for this one.
All right. So, hey, real quick, as he leaves, one thing I'll say just on the last thing is you look at what one thing Putin had said when Joe Biden was in his fake administration, season, is really nobody overseas feared America when Biden was in office, because there was really not a strong presence or a strong leader at the helm in our country. And because of President Trump being in office, there's been more discussion on what's going on in our neighboring countries. And because of that, we had what you just said take place, the ceasefire, etc. And Putin, I mean, you and I had this discussion before, Anthony, that Putin really alluded to the fact that a lot of countries behaved better because of the leadership of Trump. But under Joe Biden, they didn't fear Biden. They didn't fear the presence that America can bring to the table. And so I think having our presence alone, notice we haven't had a World War III just because of our presence alone. I'm not saying, we need to go out and, raise hell. I think I agree with you to an extent. We need to defend our territory, our land, our nation that God provided, our soil, 100%. But having no presence, I don't believe there would have been a ceasefire had we never had some sort of presence, because I think there are a lot of countries that fear America and what it really can bring to the table. We have the strongest military that you could even imagine, and so there is a lot that we do provide. So we'll get to the next question here. So.
Hi, my name is Joe, and I just have a question as a Christian, what would you say is the best way to balance political participation with being a Christian? How do you approach politics without hurting your witness for Jesus?
Well, that's a great question. I think people misinterpret who Jesus really was. Was he a loving guy? Absolutely. But that dude was a savage. That dude was a strong, bold guy. You don't get put on a cross for not having a voice to you and some boldness to you. We just got done talking about overturning the tables. Yeah, that probably ticked off the liberal loonies of the past in that day and age, called the Sadducees, the Pharisees. That same spirit, way of life is what you see on the left today. And so Jesus was put on a cross because he was bold, vocal, etc. He got involved in politics in his time. Now, he didn't go out and do it the vengeful way like the Zealots did. He didn't go out and, slit someone's throat and, try to, say, hey, we're going to overtake Rome here. No, we're just going to speak the truth, okay? And how do you speak the truth? You do it in love. So that ultimately, though, when he overturned the tables, that was a righteous anger. He didn't go in there and create violence. He just went in there and, basically used his voice, and he didn't, whip a person, but he was destroying all the things that were in there and basically saying like, hey, this is sinful. This is terrible. This is not honoring God. This is not honoring truth. This is terrible. This is an evil plan. This is something that doesn't bring honor. So, and then the other thing he also said is he called Herod a fox. So he said, go tell Herod that fox, talking about, hey, this is the king of the area. Go tell him this and that. And basically, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You are the worst and most evil person in that city. And you are killing people. You are silencing people's voices. You're, committing sexual acts, this, that, and the other. So Jesus was bold. And then he, stood up to the Sadducees and Pharisees because, I've always said this. There's a difference in somebody that asks you a question and then they want to ask a question to gain insight, or asking a question to question you and your motives. That was the difference between the disciples and the Pharisees. The disciples wanted to be discipled. They wanted to be taught. The Sadducees and Pharisees wanted to try to trap Jesus, and there's a massive difference. And that's what we're seeing in culture today, truthfully.
So when you look at politics, just at its most basic level, it is dealing with the governing of daily human affairs. That's what politics is. Now, when you look at the Bible in its essence, what does it do? Governs daily human affairs. You can't separate the two. And here's why. In Genesis 1, as soon as God made Adam, he said, go, have dominion. Dominion means to operate fully in your purpose to do good in the earth. Good being according to God's righteousness, his standard, his ways. So if you look at politics, it is governing human affairs according to whose way? Well, supposed to be.
Yeah, supposed to be, yeah.
But
yeah.
Depending on who we vote in, it could be man's way.
Yeah, because politics is like, you have to have some sort of, moral standard to live by. And you can't really separate the, politics and judicial system of the United States apart from Judeo-Christian values. But I guess what I was getting more at was more just on a personal level. I haven't been the most political person
Sure.
For most of my life up until maybe the last couple of years, just being able to vote and stuff. But I feel with some of my friends growing up or people I knew, if I were to bring up my Christian viewpoint within a political conversation, it immediately turns the other person, they just get angry or they're just always hostile. So it's just I don't want to bring up those political things because I don't want to hurt my witness to tell them about my faith, because I feel sometimes people kind of, if they already have a bad view of God or bad view of Christianity, if you start to bring politics into it, that just turns them off even more. So I'm is there, and this will be my last question because I know we got a big line,
Sure.
But is there a balance of refraining from talking about political issues so that you can reach them for Jesus, I guess And if you guys have like experiences just as students with, I know, people here, like, I'd love to hear that too.
What kind of experiences?
I don't know, just like, have you been able to like have conversations that are, I guess, Christ or gospel oriented, and still talk about politics and not have that be kind of like a cause anger, or like, not anger, but just like, how do you balance that? I don't know. And if you want to answer, because you were asking earlier, but.
This is just my blunt opinion, but there is no balance.
Okay.
If you're going to talk about the Bible and you're going to talk about your personal relationship with Jesus, politics are going to be involved, because it's talking about moral standards. Politics can't be distributed or talked about without discussing moral standards. And if you have someone getting mad at you about that, then so be it. There were plenty of people that got mad at Jesus about what he brought forth to the table.
True.
And so in my opinion, what we're facing right now with why people are getting so mad is because you're actually beginning to occupy a position that you were supposed to occupy all the time. So now you're starting to take territory that people aren't used to us being in if you're a Christian, right? And that's not bad, and that doesn't mean you shy away. That just means, hey, I have a right as well to speak on this, because it is my legal right as a citizen of the United States to bring my moral standard and viewpoint to the table if we're talking about how laws are going to affect my daily life, but also the future of this nation.
I agree.
So you would say, though, to that if your personal faith-based beliefs are infringed upon, that it naturally becomes political.
Yes, because we have the freedom of religion. I would agree.
Correct. So
Yeah.
if a student that is taking a final has automatically failed the final because they brought a Bible to the classroom and read it while they finished their final early, they're not allowed to graduate now. I would say that's political. Would you agree with that?
Yes, probably, yeah.
So in that regard, the only option would be to use our voice for what we believe in. And naturally, as Anthony said, it's just political.
Yeah.
They have this whole segment or, thing they say about, the separation of church and state and all of that. That is not to keep us as Christians in the church out of politics. It's to keep the government out of the church and from infringing upon our rights as daily citizens and Christians and people that want to live a moral Christian life and not have that infringed upon.
Yeah. I appreciate your guys' response.
Hi, my name is Molly, and I would just like to add that I like that Olive K is working with autism, because I have autism myself. And what's a good way we can make food more safer so people with disabilities and without disabilities can be healthy without all the not so safe stuff in food?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we have to start by banning the food coloring that is in our foods. I don't see a reason that we need to have everything be bright and neon. If it tastes good, it is what it is. I think that all the processed junk that they put into the food, they need to take that out and get back to real, all-natural stuff. And I think that would help a lot.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Riker. I'm an American who's been all around the world. I was part of Turning Point UK, if you're familiar with that organization. One of my biggest questions, and I think we can agree on it, is how do we implement a pro-life society going forward with future generations?
First thing I'll say is everybody, before you leave tonight, go sign that document over there.
I'll get us started off then. But I would just say that our most important thing is just educating people about the effects of abortion with truth. I think that a lot of the stats that we see are false lately, but I also know that we don't know like the full repercussions. Like when we're talking about abortion, we have all these women going and getting them, and they're told that's the best option for them in the moment. And when we're looking at years afterwards, there's multiple studies done where women have deeply, deeply regretted it, 5 years, 4 years, even decades afterwards. So I think it's important for us to share that truth with people before they're going and getting an abortion, or if they're thinking about it. We need to make sure that they know like all the side effects. Most women that have abortions end up with depression or severe mental health issues afterwards due to whether it's regret or just being like ashamed or whatever feelings that they have. It leads to future mental health issues. Most women are having abortions. It's over 45% of abortions are women under the age of 25. And so when we have all these young women out there who are getting pressured in it, most of those women are still like college, high school age. You're in an echo chamber of usually liberal campuses so that's the best option for you. There's no one out there telling them the truth. So I think that that's the most important thing that we can do, is just to bring truth and dignity and share these women that they have other options. So yeah.
All right. So I fully agree. When I first started college, I immediately got into the political atmosphere, especially regarding abortion. And one of the two things you commonly heard, especially in the school I went to, Baylor University down in Waco, Texas, is one, the fear of connection to the child, so they got an abortion early. Or they thought no matter when or what time it was, it's perfectly acceptable all the way up until birth to get rid of it for the common statements, it's just a clump of cells, which obviously is a lie. Because, well, we're all a clump of cells. And my argument's always, a lot of this is, if you're spiritual or Christian, it's demonic behavior. It's just evil behavior. Because a lot of people have started feeling that, not only is it okay to have an abortion, but you should be proud you have an abortion. And some people literally say what it is. Killing a baby is perfectly okay. What is your opinion on people who think this, and the fact that a lot of people that are growing up are influencing other people to think this way?
The theme behind this, because the abortion itself and what we've seen is actually the byproduct and the result of a system of thought that has an incomplete viewpoint of justice. When you think about justice, we always think about, putting the bad guy in jail, but really justice is about understanding the rights of all parties involved. There is a lack of understanding of the parties that are involved when it comes to the baby, the mother, but we also forget one other party, God. Anytime you make a decision that impacts somebody else, it's not just about how it makes you feel. It's not just about how the other person might feel, but what does God say about this? That is the complete viewpoint and perspective of justice. And when we start including what God says about certain things, and we start coming from that standpoint and valuing justice from a more complete perspective, then I believe we'll start to see these things change. The other issue that we're facing right now of why this is such a rampant thing that's widely accepted is we are in a culture right now that values how we feel in the moment without understanding the repercussion of consequences. We have got to get out of this mindset of doing what feels good in the moment without even considering the potential impact of what could take place as a result. Amelie already gave out some stats, but I think if you look at the majority of your I think 50%, I believe, or is a good majority of your major cities have either a stagnant or negative birth rate since 2001. You can look that up. In New York City alone in 2018, there were more black babies aborted than were born. So our feel-good decisions in the moment, I'm not calling it a feel-good mode, I'm just saying, is actually hindering the nation as a whole. And you have to ask yourself, if everybody is being negatively impacted by one person's decision, is that true justice?
So I have to fully agree. My last question to let our people move on is, one of our biggest problems is extremely liberal states. We take New York, California, and we're talking about states that are hardcore liberal year after year. And we know that they not only support very liberal ideas, but extremely radical ideas. And the idea is, how do we as a country move forward trying to heal our nation, especially in the question of abortion? How do we get a lot of these states that not only fully support this idea, but a lot of people go to these states to get legal and extremely unsafe abortions, no matter what? I don't care if it's legal or not, it's unsafe. How do we move forward and stop such states from doing such things?
We become louder. And what I mean by that is not just using our voice. Matthew already said it eloquently, but there has to be a measure of works. You know, some of these, like, I think there's, who's familiar with Spera Vita, but there's an organization here in Omaha that's very widely known, but they're actually responsible for setting up clinics to educate women on what they can do to be able to support that baby. Or they provide avenues to make it easier to put that baby up for adoption. So what we're facing right now is, yes, while it's one thing to tell people it's wrong, people are not openly seeing the solution or the alternative. And I think once we start putting our resources behind godly alternatives to give people that opportunity to make a conscious decision that is for the right, we'll start to see things change.